Welcome, everybody. If you're anything like me, you're probably tired of media that either lies to you directly or dodges around the tough issues. Especially now, any rational or honest person can see that the Trump presidency represents a genuine threat to social and economic cohesion across the United States of America and indeed the rest of the world. So the fact is, people need to be better informed so they can better judge what's really going on. And on this show, we will give you the unfiltered truth and we will give you opinion that is highly informed. And we will give you this truth with no fear and no favour. Hello everybody and welcome to episode 2 of No Fear, No Favour. I'm delighted to introduce and welcome our special guest, Mr. Adam Jacoby. G'day, Adam.
Hello, mate. How are you?
Very well indeed. We're going to get straight into it, mate. This show, we are talking about Trump Mark II. What do we expect from the second Trump presidency? We're going to have 4 key segments we want to look at. The first one is a rundown on some of the appointments Trump is making to Cabinet and also to DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. I prefer to pronounce it as dodgy, but that's my choice. Also, Trump's inauguration and some of the surrounding events there. Our second segment, we're going to be talking about basically Trump policies that we're seeing through some of the executive orders that he's actually put into place. The next one, segment 3, a really important one, I reckon. We're going to talk about the famous Epstein list. Are we going to see it? Are we not? And some of the surrounding rumours and scuttlebutt there. Mate, let's get straight into it. Segment number 1. Let's talk about some of these appointments that Trump has made to Cabinet, and then we'll have a chat about Elon. First person I'll bring up is Matt Gaetz. Give us your feelings about what you saw with the potential Matt Gaetz appointment.
It doesn't, to me, it's a funny thing, right, these appointments, because it almost doesn't matter which name you read out. You can kind of classify them all in the same way. Grossly underqualified to do their jobs, morally and legally compromised in some of their prior behaviour, and have almost all been attached to comments that would, in an ordinary circumstance, with an ordinary government, an ordinary president, make them ineligible. So, Matt Gaetz is just a despicable human being, let's be honest. I mean, this is a guy who everybody knows the behaviour that has been going on for a long time. It is not unknown to the GOP, what they've put up there. To me, the interesting thing about Gaetz, Hegseth, and others is that when the names were originally canvassed by Trump, even people on the right, the GOP, were going, "Oh, I'm not sure about this. That doesn't seem right to me." But then when it comes to the actual, the period of having to accept them, they all get passed.
Yeah.
And so to me, this is the thing. There's a lot of noise about I'm not sure. And then when push comes to shove, nobody stands up to Trump. The issue for me is not only should he not be in government, Matt Gaetz shouldn't be allowed 100 feet from a school.
It's amazing how, the great party of family values and Christian values can actually even consider having a person like that in a position of power. We'll move on to Pete Hegseth.
I'm straight up just saying we should not have women in combat roles. It hasn't made us more effective, hasn't made us more lethal, has made fighting more complicated. Our institutions don't have to incentivize that in places where not traditionally, over human history, men in those positions are more capable.
I also want an opportunity here to clarify comments that have been misconstrued that I somehow don't support women in the military. Some of our greatest warriors, our best warriors out there are women.
So he's either lying to the American people when he was a host, or he's lying to them now as a nominee.
Look, at the end of the day, he's actually been selected. There are a million reasons, again, including sexual assault, drunkenness on the job. Just a horrible, horrible history, and also the complete lack of integrity because he was an employee of Fox News. But he's in. He's now running this massive department, billions of dollars under control, hundreds of thousands of employees. It's almost a joke, I think.
Yeah, look, for me, I mean, aside from one that we'll get to in a moment, the Pete Hegseth one is probably the most disturbing. For one thing, you have a giant military with a lot of women who serve, and the message to those women now is that you can have a known sex offender, a known assaulter of multiple partners. His own mother wrote a letter to say that he was unfit to serve, for God's sake. And so the message that sends those women in uniform is that their protection doesn't matter. And that actually, when push comes to shove, for all the rhetoric around sexual safety and sexual misconduct that happens in the military, it doesn't matter. We're going to hire the very thing that we tell everybody not to be. That to me is hugely concerning. The other part, which really hasn't got enough airplay in my mind, there's been a lot about the drinking and there's been a lot about the assaults, and they're important issues to raise. But the white nationalist piece, the Christian white nationalist piece, is even more concerning, because what you have is a guy who fundamentally believes that being white is superior. He's very publicly been anti-Muslim in the worst kind of ways, and this is a guy who's going to control the largest the largest military in the world, that has really dangerous views about who is worthy of protection and who deserves to be defeated.
Yeah.
To me, it's an absolutely horrendous appointment, and I think it devalues America immensely. I will say one other thing about Hegseth.
Yeah.
The thing about Hegseth, and this is the thing about the US appointment process that I find disturbing, is that you can find the most tenuous links to the portfolio to justify expertise. So Hegseth served in the military, but just because somebody serves for a brief period of time in the military does not mean that they are capable of heading up the entire defense portfolio. It's kind of like saying, I once flew in an aeroplane, so I'm now going to become the head of aviation engineering for Emirates.
Yeah.
It's just fucking stupid, and it's
Yeah.
nonsensical. This job is so far above his capability and his temperament. It's frightening. And
Yeah.
for me, the GOP has lost all credibility when it comes to any rhetoric around the military now. You
Yep.
can't tell me that you care about the military. You can't tell me that protecting the military is important. You can't tell me that having defense intelligence is there. You can't tell me that leadership matters if you're going to appoint a person like this to head up the entire institution.
Spot on. And also, probably the most concerning thing about Hegseth in his history is even people that served in his own unit were concerned about him. And in fact, I think he was removed from a security detail for it might have been Biden's inauguration, because some of his fellow soldiers basically said, yeah, I'm concerned about this guy, and they removed him. So we talked briefly about Kennedy. Let me just make a couple of points about him very quickly. One of them is people should Google what happened in Samoa when it came to vaccines over there, and he was a big driver of forget about vaccines. I think 83 people, mainly children, died after that. He's, of course, tried to walk that back. I think he is a clear and present danger in terms of health. I think he's a disgraceful human being. And again, Trump has targeted him as somebody in a leadership position in the US. It's incredible.
Yeah, look, to me, RFK is he's nothing more than a conspiracy theorist. He believes the most idiotic things. He's head of a portfolio that should be underpinned by science, and he doesn't believe in science. So that pretty much is as Trumpian as it gets, really. But I think he will kill more Americans than any human in history.
Yeah, and combined with Trump, when you look at his management of COVID, it could be the most frightening potential enemy that the United States has, their own president and their main health guy.
Well, and the fact that one of their policies immediately, literally within the first 3 days, is that they've cut off all medical research funding, all cancer research funding. They've taken the caps, and this is the bit that is so counterintuitive to what they say. They talk about going up against big pharma. They talk about all these sorts of things. The policies are to now take the caps off drugs.
Yeah.
So now those big pharma organizations are going to be able to go back to charging $1,500 for an insulin shot instead of $58. And, this happens in a time where they're saying that's the exact opposite of what we were going to do. I mean, apart from anything, they're full of shit like always, right?
But Adam, I think the thing about that, the only positive is that the MAGA base, it's going to hit them hard.
Yeah,
And
it will.
maybe this might be the ultimate result is some of these ridiculous policies, which we'll get onto, will finally convince some very, very simple people he is hurting you. He's hurting you.
I think I think you're right, mate. There's no question that there will be a point in time where enough of the MAGA base realise that they've been duped.
Yep.
The question is, does that period of time happen before or after the rights have been stripped away from them and there's nothing they can do about it anymore?
Yeah. True enough. And look, let's move on in terms of the cabinet. Pam Bondi. Now, I just want you to have a look at this little video here, which was done by Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, which I think summarises it pretty quickly. Let's take a quick look.
He said that Bondi was unaware of dozens of consumer complaints received by her office about Trump's real estate seminars at the time she requested the donation. So let me get this right. You're aware of the complaints enough to say, hey, I'm going to investigate you on fraud. At the same time, you ask for a political donation from him. And then you get the donation, and then all of a sudden you become unaware of dozens of complaints again. The timing on that seems a little off. In addition to the money given by his foundation, Trump himself has donated $253,500.
I don't think there has been a more blatant display of corruption than an attorney general being paid off not to prosecute Trump for the Trump University scam, which he was eventually prosecuted for, or there was a civil case, and he had to pay out $25 million to students that he'd actually ripped off. And that Pam Bondi has now got the ultimate prize from Trump for her corruption.
It's a funny one, isn't it? Because the Attorney General's role is always going to be one that was going to trouble Trump because it requires integrity at its base, right?
Yeah.
And so to go from a Matt Gaetz who didn't get accepted to a Bondi, when Gaetz left, you kind of thought, oh, well, you couldn't get worse than Gaetz. And then he managed to magically find somebody worse than Gaetz.
Yeah.
So, he has form. Bondi's a joke. I think she is the perfect legal representation of the Trump administration.
Yeah, spot on. It's quite incredible with Pam Bondi as well, is that during her confirmation hearings, she was asked directly, do you believe the 2020 election was rigged? And the typical answer for these conspiracy theorists is Joe Biden is the president. So she's actually hand in hand with Trump in saying 2020 was rigged. She's now the main legal officer in the United States. It's laughable.
Yeah, I think the justice system is the area where we're going to see most pushback in the short term until Bondi is able to start changing rules and removing judges and reappointing judges. But we're already seeing little bits and pieces of it. Some of the policies, you're already getting legal pushback right now. Certainly the attempt to change the 14th Amendment has been halted by the courts for now. But
and that's
aside from the fact that
that's the birthright citizenship we're talking about.
And aside from the fact that I don't think Bondi has the intellectual horsepower to do the job, we know that she doesn't have the moral fortitude.
Yeah, and I think in summary of those cabinet appointments, that the only qualification you need is that every appointment must have 100% loyalty to him, not the states, not to the country, not to the Constitution. It is loyalty to Trump. That's all that matters, and that's what we're seeing.
It's the dictatorship. That's what we've got right now.
Yeah. And there's no more pretending about it, which is a good thing. The last person we want to speak about in terms of not an official appointment, in effect, but is the
space Nazi. Are we talking about the space Nazi?
The space Nazi, yeah, about Fantastic. Elon Musk. Elon Musk and Dodgy, the Department of Government Efficiency. Let's have a little look at a video about Elon, which is a nice little reflection about Elon and his past business practices and his development as a businessman over time?
I think Elon Musk is good at two things. From what we can tell, he's not really a genius, or a rocket scientist, or an engineer, or maybe even a competent programmer. He's good at getting talented people to work for him, but he's best at self-promotion. Musk has spent the past few decades crafting a persona for himself, a cult of personality, and in the process has developed a fan base that seems to find him charming. Part of this is by just lying. I mean, I can guarantee you that most of Musk's fans out there aren't aware that he isn't actually the founder of PayPal or Tesla. They don't know about how his family's connections got some of those off the ground, and they definitely don't know about some of these lawsuits. When projects like the Hyperloop fail, as everybody expected them to, he just sweeps that under the rug, and people look the other way. He has managed to embody what I like to call techno-populism. Just say a bunch of big sciencey sounding buzzwords that mean absolutely nothing, and people that don't know any better will just assume you're a genius. However,
Now, so the reality of Elon's business background, this is my opinion, but I think it's getting more and more widely shared. He is not a genius. He's a very strange person, but he's absolutely not a genius. He's a Nepo baby that got a lot of money from his dad and sounds very familiar to another person we know that just happens to be president. And he bought these businesses, PayPal, SpaceX, Tesla. There were geniuses behind them that created these businesses. He came in with money and bought them. He even sued the original founders of Tesla for them to say, yeah, Elon was one of the founders. Like he's a self-promoter, he's a pretend genius. But now I would argue he is the most dangerous person in the world because he's got his useful idiot in front of him. Am I being unfair, Adam?
So I agree, and I've been posting and saying for some time that Musk's genius is well overstated. I think he is a genius salesman, and I think he's a genius brand builder of himself. But he's not an engineer. He's the code that is being written that is changing the world from those products is not code that came from his head, or his hands. I think the interesting thing about Trump and Musk is that, both have white supremacy backgrounds in their family, both have poor relationships with their father, both inherited a crap load of money. Neither have been well liked by their peers within their professional careers their whole lives. They have both manufactured their own brand based on lies. They both believe that they're infallible geniuses. They both have had multiple relationship failures. They both have a dramatically inflated sense of the respect that's been earned. And they both have a complete lack of empathy for other people. So they're a match made in heaven. Elon Musk is a Nazi. Let's be super clear about this, right? So I don't get. I'm beyond accommodating for a moment the idea that it's a Roman gesture, that he's autistic. It's such an affront to autism and autistic people that they're saying, that salute was because he's autistic. What an absolute load of crap. The man is a Nazi. He writes about Nazi things. He comes from a Nazi family. He talks about white supremacy. He jokes about it in tweets. The only good news out of this, it is worth saying also, I don't think Musk is going to survive more than another couple of years.
Yep.
Either the drugs will take him because he's a ketamine addict, or somebody will eradicate him from the situation.
There's a third option. And the third option is when he starts flying too close to the sun, like Icarus did, and the sun in this case.
Well, that Trump will get rid of him. But here's the thing. So this has already started. So there's news today. I don't know if you've seen it. It came out very early this morning from the US that the chief of staff, Trump's new chief of staff, has now moved the Doge office and Elon out of the West Wing, and that she is now limiting his access to Trump.
Here we go. So it's starting already. And keep in mind another thing about Doge. Do you remember the name of the great billionaire that was supposed to be part of this? Vivek. He's been bumped. He's now aiming to be governor of Ohio. So I think that the House of Cards might be shaking a little bit, mate.
It's very interesting that the first role that got cut under efficiency was his own. So yeah.
Well, just one thing I want to do, because you mentioned it, and it's important that we have a visual here. I just want to play a video that shows that the salute that Elon did but also his other associations and mentions of neo-Nazis in the world. Let's have a look at this.
Thank you.
Billionaire oligarch Elon Musk has long supported right-wing causes here in the United States, including spending $250 million to re-elect Donald Trump. But recently he's decided to take his political project global, backing far-right parties in many other countries and using his massive platform to attack anyone who doesn't share his views. Let's start with Germany. In December, Musk publicly endorsed the German Alternative for Deutschland, or AfD, a far-right political party with deep ties to the neo-Nazi movement. Its founder and former leader, Alexander Golan, has said that Germany should be proud of its soldiers in the world wars and that people should no longer reproach Germans for World War II. Another prominent AfD leader openly plays with Nazi themes, shouting at meetings, "Everything for Germany," a Nazi stormtrooper slogan banned in Germany.
What we'll quickly move on to is the inauguration of President Donald Trump. And just before it happened, by the way, Adam, as any president should do, Trump launched a shitcoin, a meme coin, raising tens of billions of dollars from MAGA. And this coin actually is 80% owned by Trump-aligned organisations as well.
And crashed 4 days later.
Crashed 4 days later. And then Melania, the day after, launched her coin as well.
And they're now talking about Barron having a coin.
It used to be with Richard Nixon that if you're going to be corrupt, at least, I don't know, get a few layers, don't be so obvious.
Yeah.
Now it's just out in the open and they don't care. And by the way,
it's not a democracy.
I have to show you. Let's have a quick look at this video, which gives some really good background to the launch of the coin and Trump's reaction. Let's have a look at this.
To a new crypto task force just launched today by the SEC, supporters of the digital currency are hoping the president's promised golden age extends to them.
The reign of terror against crypto is over.
And now, after using his Trump brand to sell everything from steaks and vodka to sneakers and Bibles, the president promoting his company's newly launched Trump meme coin.
I don't know much about it other than I launched it. I heard it was very successful.
At one point, the Trump coin rocketing from $6.50 to more than $72. Today, trading closer to $45 a coin. A similar coin, named for Melania, launched just yesterday. And ethics experts concerned about conflicts of interest and the Trump family enriching themselves off these coins.
He has the power now not only to be making money, but he's actually going to be in position to be making determinations around that entire sector.
The United States will be the crypto capital of the planet and the Bitcoin superpower of the world.
For the president, an evolution from just 3 years ago.
Bitcoin, it just seems like a scam.
It is quite remarkable. Give us your feelings on the new meme coin.
Oh, look, I think the meme coin is like everything else that Trump touches. It's a lot of hot air intended to rob people who don't have a lot of money of what little money they have as a means of enriching himself through lies. But if people are stupid enough to buy it, that's on them. I think he's like we've spoken about in the last episodes, he's a master grifter. This is just a grift, right? I think for me, some of the more concern, and again, this has had very little coverage. You know, the fact that Jeff Bezos is paying Melania Trump $40 million for her own television show to be on Amazon Prime is a much bigger form of corruption. Yeah. Because the redneck sitting in Tennessee who buys the meme coin and loses $12.50, all it does is enrich Trump. It doesn't do anything else.
Yeah.
But when you're actually having oligarchs bribe the president by paying family members for stuff that nobody needs or wants, now all of a sudden there is a transactional relationship that comes with expectation. And that is much more dangerous than an idiot buying cryptocurrency.
Yeah. A little bit similar to Jared Kushner getting $200 billion from the Saudis.
But in fact, if you look at the foreign relations policy pieces, it's not a coincidence that literally every single one of them advances Putin's agenda.
Yep.
Every single one. And you know, you can make a claim that this is about US sovereignty, but Greenland has nothing to do with US sovereignty, but it has a shitload to do with where Russia wants to drive its oil through.
Absolutely.
So, and do drilling. So, you know, yeah. again, we're still in the superficial phase of this presidency, where we're getting bamboozled and misdirected like a magic show about the stuff that, like a Hegseth or whatever. They're big stories, but they're not globally consequential stories in terms of it empowering others or furthering other agendas.
Yeah.
All we're talking about is the internal celebrity piece of the US. As the policies start to reveal themselves in a meaningful way, and the puzzle starts to come together, we'll have a much better sense of exactly how bad this is.
Yeah, absolutely. And for everybody out there, Google emoluments, the emoluments clause in the Constitution. You're not supposed to enrich yourself or make any other money, especially from foreign players, as president. And Trump doesn't give a shit. And he's been doing it from day one. He just doesn't care.
Yeah, and I mean, that is a concern. What he's doing is just straight out mobster shit. However, what I will add, though, is that to me, of all of the policies and all of the actions that have happened, probably the most concerning in the early days is the removal of the 12 inspector generals. Their jobs across all the different government portfolios is to look for corruption and to whistleblow on things that are morally indefensible and against government requirements. And he has removed all of that independent oversight from his government, all of it, so that there is now nobody watching how the government behaves and has a seat to be able to say, hang on a second, that breaches the law. Hang on a second, that breaches the guidelines. Hang on, you're not allowed to do that. Hang on, that's corrupt. There is now nobody to do that because it's efficient to get rid of those roles.
Yeah. And you know what? It's probably a great way to segue into some of his policies and the execution of executive orders that he's done actually from day one. And let me just play this little video here to give everybody a bit of a feel about what a TV event he turned this into. But it's almost like watching an episode of The Apprentice again. Let's have a little look at this.
There's nobody like this guy. They said, how did you get David Sachs? How did you do that? And he's doing it for the country more than anything else. So we appreciate it, David. Thank you very much.
This is an executive order establishing a presidential commission, an advisory commission on science and technology.
Good. You want to explain that a little bit?
The basic idea is to get together top people from government, the private sector, technology industry, as well as educational institutions, to make sure that America maintains its leadership position with respect to science and technology development in the years ahead.
Good. That's great.
In the interest of time, let's pick maybe 2 or 3 of the executive orders that Trump actually has implemented, are the ones that concern you most.
Oh, where do you begin? There's Paris, there's, removing from the World Health Organization. There's
the Paris Agreement.
Yeah, the Paris Agreement. To me, I think birthright citizenship, the 14th Amendment is probably the scariest, because that is an amendment that is designed to protect people who are born in the US and maintain their rights as US citizens. And the fact that he is intending to do that effectively puts every single American at risk.
Yep.
Because it no longer matters whether you're an American citizen, that your government will protect you. Now, obviously, all of this is underpinned by his hatred of immigrants and his racism. And so what he's trying to do is go, well, hang on a second. If there are members of your family that aren't American, then I want to be able to get rid of the whole family. And I can't do that right now because some of you are actually born here. So what I'm going to do is try and get rid of that amendment so that I can move the whole lot of you on. So this is a mass deportation project management piece, effectively. But it's highly unconstitutional. The court has stopped it for now. It'll just get it. They'll continue sending it up until it gets to the Supreme Court, which he owns. In which case, he'll get what he wants anyway. So that's pretty scary. I think removing
just
caps
on that, Just
Yep.
on that too, one of the other key tenets of the Constitution is that the U.S. military should never be deployed against its own people. But by declaring a national emergency at
Yeah.
the southern border, they now manage to do
They
that.
can,
They're actually
yeah.
sending troops down there, which is effectively against U.S. citizens and associated people.
Yeah. Look, you touched on earlier, when will the MAGA cult start to realize that this is not good for them? I think one of the policy positions, a couple of the policy positions immediately that have come up will do that. So one of them is taking price caps off medication. And some of that medication is, for diabetes as an example.
Yeah.
And so, this is going to dramatically affect their ability to manage their illnesses. And it will become cost prohibitive for most people in America now. So, for example, insulin's going to go up from tens of dollars to over $1,500.
Yeah.
And so those sorts of drugs are going to very quickly help people realize that, hey, this president isn't trying to protect me. This is the thing he promised he wouldn't do, and he's doing it. In fact, he did it in his first 3 days.
Just on that point, people in Australia need to realise, because we've got a pretty good healthcare system compared to America, is that a lot of these people, especially people not working, do not have health insurance. They do not have coverage. Yeah. They cannot afford to pay for this. They'll die. That's the simple. There's going to be real world consequences for these people.
100% correct. And the US health system is well known to be one of the worst in the world in terms of its accessibility for all Americans. And it's the only health system in the world that bankrupts so many people every year. I think, the other thing, though, that we need to talk about when it comes to the policies and the medical area is that for all of the problems of the health system and people not being able to access it or going bankrupt when they do, America's medical research is really one of the best in the world as an industry. So much money is poured into it. The fact that they have stopped all funding to medical research is deeply concerning. It has global impact and effect, and we should be really concerned about that. And then when you put that in the hands of RFK, a complete moron, it's even more scary again.
Yeah.
Another one, and probably this hasn't got a lot of attention, but for me, one of the great honors of my life was in 2018. I was invited to speak on stage with a couple of those kids from the March for Our Lives group. So these are the kids that started in the wake of all the school shootings, and David Hogg and Emma Gonzalez. And so I was able to stand on stage and give a speech with them in Houston, which was an extraordinary experience. To see in the first 3 days that Trump has closed the office responsible for the protection of school shootings is so abhorrent and enrages me so much. It is such a dangerous thing to do, and the signal that it sends to children in that country is that my government does not give a shit if I die. Yep. Now, ironically, this very same party cares about you when you're still in the stomach, but once you come out of the stomach, they don't give a fuck about you.
Yep.
And in some ways, sickeningly, you kind of go, they're doing everything they can to make sure that baby gets born so that it can end up getting killed at school.
Yeah.
Because they're going to go give no protection for them when they're there. The society is really sick and it's really broken.
Yeah, I agree. And look, there's two of his executive orders that I want to bring up. The first one, I won't go into too much detail, but the pardon of the 1,500 January 6 insurrectionists.
Unbelievable.
Including one guy, and we've all seen the video, although the right wing insists it's different, that it was a tour. But there's one where you see them stomping police officers, spraying them, with pepper spray and the like. One of the officers actually had 2 strokes and died the next day. And they've pardoned them, and the people being pardoned are out there laughing, and it's just sending a message saying it's fine, go and do it again. And so if I ever hear another Republican or another GOP wanker talk about how they back the blue and they back the police, fuck it.
Tough on crime.
Oh, it's just infuriating. And then the second part, which I think is the most disgusting thing I've seen in a long time, is that as part of the whole immigration thing and people coming into America, is that they stopped the planes of, I think it was about 1,600 people over in Afghanistan who were promised by the Americans, we'll look after you after the war. These were translators. These are other people that helped them on the ground probably over 20 years, and they've left them to the Taliban. They've said, no, sorry, that's tough. Just reinforces one point about Donald Trump. apart from the fact he's probably one of the greatest arsehole human beings I've ever seen, he's incredibly stupid. He's got no curiosity whatsoever, and he's being manipulated by people like Stephen Miller and all these white supremacists around him. I honestly thought that Trump's presidency was he wouldn't do anything because he's inherently lazy and incompetent. But he's got these people around him enacting this Project 2025 stuff, and I got it completely wrong. It's worse than I could possibly have believed.
Yeah, look, I've been thinking a lot about that, actually. Before I get on to that, I do want to talk about that. I'll just touch on one last policy piece. And the policy piece that I think we really need to talk about is the elimination of DEI across the government. So, DEI is about diversity and equity and inclusion.
Yeah.
And to basically say that we're not having any DEI hires is to reinforce, it's basically to legalize white supremacy in government hiring.
Yep.
That's all they're doing. The reality is that take the D out of it for a second, and you just look at the E and the I, the only people who would argue against equity and inclusivity are sociopaths. You can't, there's no way you could possibly say that being inclusive is a bad thing or equity is a bad thing unless you actually have something wrong with you. And then the D is the kicker, because the D then introduces racism. And so what the D says is we don't want diversity here. We in fact are actively going to stop diversity. We are going to actively stop there being equity in the way that we do run the government, and we're going to stop all kinds of inclusion. That is not normal behavior. That is psychologically, that is not normal. So this is a white supremacist Nazi government doing white supremacist Nazi things, creating policies that further that agenda, for an end that frankly we don't yet know. It hasn't revealed itself. So we have to wait and see what happens there.
Right.
In terms of what you were talking about, and the psychology of some of this, I've been thinking a lot about that, and I don't think Trump thought he was actually going to win the first time. And so the first time he got hired, he didn't have any plans because he didn't think he'd get there. He then loved the trappings of it, so he played golf every day because he's a fucking idiot, lazy moron. And so he was like, I don't know what this job is. I don't know what I'm here for, but I like the power and the fact that people have to give me, the respect that I believe I deserve everywhere I go. And then he left in disgrace, twice impeached. Quite the legacy. And never would have imagined that he was going to come back. He said it, but I don't think he believed it. Because I don't think he believed the American people were stupid enough to elect a twice impeached convicted felon into that office.
Yeah.
And then when it became clear that in fact he might get elected, then it became, well, what is this one going to be about? I may as well make this be about something, further whatever beliefs I have. And that's when the Project 25s came around, and that's when Musk's white supremacy came around, and that's when all of a sudden Stephen Miller starts getting listened to. You start going, well, hang on a second, we have unfettered power. We're going to win by a lot. We already control the Supreme Court, which means that legally they're not going to be able to stop us. If we can win enough of both houses, then legislatively they can't stop us. We can pretty much legislate anything we want. And his psychology about negotiation is always about bullying. We're already seeing it with Greenland and others. And so it just becomes this perpetuation of the bullying, knowing that for the first time in his life, he can control both the media story that comes with it and the legal protection that is normally against him.
And also, one last point too, which we should never forget, is that the Republican Party is now the MAGA party. It is completely and utterly beholden to Trump. Not one Republican will ever step up against Trump for fear of their own career.
Well, interestingly, there were 4 Republicans who voted against Hegseth in the appointments. We are yet to see what kind of backlash and shitstorm is going to hit those 4 people, but you can absolutely guarantee that it will, but only after the rest of the appointments are done.
And keep in mind, Adam, they've probably done the numbers, and they probably can say to a couple of constituents, we weren't happy with this, but they knew that he'd get through anyway. What will be interesting too, we won't talk about this in detail now, but 2 or 3 years down the track, I'm intrigued. I'll get the popcorn out for this, but the jostling amongst some of the most disgusting human beings, Republicans in America, for who will lead the party next and be their next president, perhaps, will be fascinating to see. It's not a two-party system anymore. And we've got some genuine people out there who aren't compromised. So donations out of politics are so important. Plus, shows like this, independent journalism, where you can speak with no fear and no favour and actually call it out as it is. I think it's the only way. I see prospects for that. I see hope for that. But in America, especially with Musk and with Fox News, it's just too hard to fight against that wave at this point. But it will change.
Yeah, and look, America was never really America's never been a democracy. So they're a democracy in name only.
Yeah,
they like to promote when they say democracy in the same way as when they say Christian values. What they mean is capitalism.
Yeah,
that's actually what they're talking about. And so when they say we're moving into this country, we're going to invade and because, we're going to make them a democratic regime, that's not what they're talking about. What they're talking about is making them a highly capitalist regime that they can then exploit. It's not about democracy. Democracy in their country is about misinformation and money. And if the only way that you can become president of the United States is to have $1 billion war chest to start, that's not democracy. I'm sorry. If the court system is ruled by government, it's not a democracy. If the media is controlled by government, it's not a democracy. If not every person has the ability to vote, it's not a democracy. If policy can be bought by vested interests, it's not a democracy. And so these are the things we talk about democracies in a particular way, and we think we understand what they mean. And I'm banging on about this all over. I used to do it face to face. Now I'm doing it digitally to lawmakers all over the world and legislators, that they have to stop saying it, because what it does is perpetuate the myth that people think that they are fighting for something that they are not.
Yep.
And stop pretending that taking on this fight will give you democracy, because you have no intention of creating democracy. All you intend to do is replace whatever is there with your particular ideology, which is just as undemocratic.
Yeah.
So,
Adam, I think the point of this show too is for a lot of people who haven't studied politics or actually perhaps aren't that interested but are worried, when we throw out terms like democracy and capitalism and different things, I think a lot of people, we just assume people understand that. They don't. See, a lot of people that praise capitalism aren't praising capitalism. They're actually praising entrepreneurialism. Like the idea of somebody building a business. Capitalism and the whole idea of capitalism, we'll talk about this another time, has a much deeper, darker meaning that a lot of people actually realise. I think what I'd like to talk to you about now as a final segment, and it's a big one, is about Jeffrey Epstein and his famous list. Now, I just want you to have a little look at this video about Trump being asked about a number of things and lists that he might release when he becomes president. Check this out.
If you were president, would you declassify, you can answer yes or no to these, would you declassify the 9/11 files?
Yeah.
Would you declassify JFK files?
Yeah. I did a lot of it.
Would you declassify the Epstein files?
Yeah, I would.
All right.
I guess I would. I think that less so because, you don't know. You don't want to affect people's lives if it's phony stuff in there, because there's a lot of phony stuff with that whole world. But I think I would, or at least
do you think that would restore trust? Help restore trust?
Yeah, I don't know about Epstein so much as I do the others.
9/11, yeah. JFK, I'm with you. Jeffrey Epstein, yeah. Well, why would Donald Trump be so circumspect about exposing the secrets of Jeffrey Epstein, a billionaire child sex trafficker who died in prison, without revealing which of his well-connected elite friends knew about and possibly even participated in his revolting and illegal activities?
Ghislaine Maxwell is in prison, and a lot of people want to know if she's going to turn in powerful people. And I know you've talked in the past about Prince Andrew, and you've criticized Bill Clinton's behavior. I'm wondering, do you feel that she's going to turn in powerful men? How do you see that working out?
I don't know. I haven't really been following it too much. I just wish her well, frankly. I've met her numerous times over the years, especially since I lived in Palm Beach, and I guess they lived in Palm Beach. But I wish her well, whatever it is. I don't know the situation with Prince Andrew. Just don't know. Not aware of it.
So now what we know is that Trump has come out recently and said, right, I'm declassifying all that information about the murder or the assassination of JFK and also Martin Luther King, and I think Robert Kennedy.
And Robert Kennedy as
and
well.
Robert Kennedy as well. But not a word, not a peep out of the Epstein list. Now, I want you to have a look at a couple of these videos, because what's going to be very interesting going forward is that here's a whole lot of MAGA types like Kash Patel and others saying we have to get the Epstein list out. Everything must be disclosed, all names out there. So let's have a little look at this video about the Republicans, the GOP, MAGA. They want to see the Epstein list.
We'd like the names on the Jeffrey Epstein list. There's no reason that if that was a bunch of truck drivers, we'd know every truck driver's name. Why don't we know this? And it is too much power in the hands of the FBI director or the president.
You know, it's the same thing with Epstein's list. It's like, what the hell are these Republicans doing?
Oh, I saw you
give out the list.
I saw you make news this morning about that. I got to get to that.
Yeah.
You say that the FBI has Epstein's list. They're sitting on it. That doesn't seem like something you should do. You're protecting the world's foremost predator. That seems like an evil thing to do, regardless of who may be embarrassed in the release of that list. Why is the FBI protecting the greatest pederast, the largest scale pederast in human history?
Simple, because of who's on that list. You don't think that Bill Gates is lobbying Congress night and day to prevent the disclosure of that list?
So, my question to you, who do you think will get top billing on the Epstein list? Because I've been studying this for a long, long while. Guess who might be number one on the list?
I don't think the list will ever come out.
Yeah.
Let me be clear about that. Or certainly not while Trumpism is in power, because he's all over it. So,
yeah.
And so many of the people that are in his inner circle are all over it.
Yes.
The only way it comes out, the only way, in my opinion, is if they are basically hand selecting what they will release to be politically beneficial to them. So you'll see Clinton and you'll see others that that make the point that the Democrats are the degenerates.
Yes.
And they won't release the whole list. They'll just handpick people that suit their purpose.
Yeah. And I think you're right. I mean, two things. I think if Trump released it, you'd see this list and there'd be 50% redactions with a big black Sharpie. Now, I'll say allegedly, but I think there's at least 20 to 30 women that have accused him credibly of sexual assault over time. I have no doubt, and I think we saw it from that video, Trump knows he's on that list. Trump knows that if he gets exposed, even MAGA might be thinking, shit, hold on, when we're dealing with children here, that might be the line.
Well, this is where you and I diverge, my friend, because I don't think MAGA will give a shit either way. So yeah. I don't think it will make a difference if his name is on the list to people who already are in the cult. The only thing it does, and this is the thing, right? And I don't think it makes a difference to the people who aren't in the cult, because we already know. So it's not like the revelation is going to be, oh, finally it's vindicated. We know that he's on the list, right?
Yeah.
We know that he was part of that world. There is photo evidence of it. They were good friends. And we know that he has a history of sexual misbehavior. So the question is the so what to it. So what? So they're on the list. Are the courts going to do anything? We already know the president can't get in trouble for anything. He's legally protected from any wrongdoing. So,
except, Adam, I'll say one thing. And this is what I want to see. I want to see it on LinkedIn. I want to see it from every Fed income journalist over in America. Release the list, and every news conference ask the question, what are we going to do? You appeared on that list. What are we going to do about it? Because obviously we can't have that sort of behaviour. Will you resign as president? So you know he's not going to, but it's got to be like the right-wing media does. The left wing have to learn this. It has to pick one thing, constant barrage, constant repetition.
If I thought the media had the wherewithal to do that, I would obviously support that as I just don't believe they'll do it. They don't stand up to anything. So
well, CNN about to sack 200 people, I think, and they're moving more digital. So even the left-wing mainstream media are starting to struggle, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting to me. the stories that are interesting now are not the stories of capitulation, which are everywhere, and not the, oh my God, here's another journalist who won't ask the hard question. We're already seeing it on ABC. Like, even this week, I was so upset to listen to a radio show I listen to in Melbourne regularly on the ABC, and they brought up the Musk salute. And even then there was equivocation. There was the awkward hand gesture language. And I was just like, what the fuck are we doing here? Like, there is just no courage anymore to tell the truth.
That's true.
And so I don't think the media will do it. In a perfect world, everybody who's on that list will go to jail. I don't think that will happen. I don't think the list will come out. And I even, there's a bit of so whatism about the Kennedy thing. And look, my first tattoo, which is here, is the Roman numerals. Those Roman numerals are the number of days that JFK served as president.
Right.
My eldest child's name is Kennedy. Right. So I'm attached to this legacy a little bit. Right. So.
I hope that doesn't apply to RFK Jr.
No, RFK is he's definitely hurting the family name. There's no question about that. But I just think that the disclosure of things that happened 50, 60 years ago are interesting because they provide closure, right? So that it just provides some reality to this theoretic, assuming they even know, assuming that the information that's there is detailed enough that it provides it. But assuming it is, then it just provides closure to what has been a question mark for some time, for some people. The story about Epstein is slightly different to me because that is these people are current. They are people in power who have authority and who pull the levers of power in society. And they have been engaged in despicable criminal acts for which all of them should be subject to some legal recourse and probably end up behind bars, I would think. But I don't think that's happened because it's not the way our judicial system works. Even before Trump, that's not the way the judicial system worked. The justice system isn't about justice. We've got to stop thinking that that's the case. The justice system there is justice for people who can't afford justice. That's what it's there for.
By the way, there's another angle to this that could be helpful. The release of the Epstein list might then expose the likes of Fox News and some of these right-wing media organisations and their so-called independent journalists to try to defend this. If the evidence is clear enough that Trump did this, he's a disgraceful human being, but because it's like the two impeachments, he'll have people around him to get.
But think of the pretzel, my friend. So this week, I wrote about this on LinkedIn. I'm so upset that the Musk. So this is the same organisation, anti-fascism. They're all about the protection of US values.
Yeah.
At a US inauguration, there is a Nazi symbol given on stage. The new position, the tech bro Fox position, is that he has autism, and calling it a Nazi salute is you being anti-autistic. This is how they turn things around into these ridiculous false narratives to absolve themselves of responsibility of anything.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with the world of disability and especially with autism. And when I hear that sort of thing, it's absolutely disgusting what apologists will come up with in order to excuse the appalling behaviour of the people they worship. And American values, that's, what, we're going to wrap up now because our next show is going to include a couple of things. We're going to talk, I'm writing a piece at the moment, I want to do this on this show, is about the whole concept of being a conservative. Let's talk about American values. Let's talk about what America stands for. But also, and I think it's most important, let's talk about what MAGA actually stands for. How is it made up? What they stand for and what their expectations are. Like what will be a pass mark for Trump, or does it not even matter? But I think that's what we're going to do on our next show, Adam, because I think it's going to be a fascinating next 4 years. There's going to be plenty of content. But I want people watching this show to walk away thinking, okay, I understand the basics about what's happening in America and in Australia a little bit more, because once you've got that platform, then we can look at, okay, how do we make it better?
Yeah, look, I great. I'm looking forward to those conversations. I think it is important though, because we've talked about a lot of stuff that is fairly sobering. for the last hour. I think it is important to remember that we are seeing some acts of resistance as well this week. And
state governors and attorney generals, for example.
We need to see more of it. So in particular, Bishop Buda, who, when the whole Trump family was sitting in front of her pulpit in that church, talked about mercy and behaving in a way that was Christian and moral and taking care of those who can't take care of themselves and showing mercy to people, I think was an extraordinary act of defiance.
Let me make one final plea, Mr. President. Millions have put their trust in you. And as you told the nation yesterday, you have felt the providential hand of a loving God. In the name of our God, I ask you to have mercy upon the people in our country who are scared now. There are gay, lesbian, and transgender children in Democratic, Republican, and independent families, some who fear for their lives. And the people who pick our crops and clean our office buildings, who labor in poultry farms and meat packing plants, who wash the dishes after we eat in restaurants and work the night shifts in hospitals, they may not be citizens or have the proper documentation. But the vast majority of immigrants are not criminals. They pay taxes and are good neighbors. I ask you to have mercy, Mr. President, on those in our communities whose children fear that their parents will be taken away, and that you help those who are fleeing war zones and persecution in their own lands to find compassion and welcome here.
Incredibly brave. She was braver in that moment than the entire Democratic Party in the last 4 years. That was extraordinary. I think Mexico refusing to allow the deportation plane to land, I think, is an incredible act of defiance, and again signals to Trump that he's not going to get everything his own way. And inside his country, he can do what he wants, but outside his country, he's nobody. He's just another fucking politician who's screaming and shouting. To that end, I think the head of Denmark standing up and saying, it's not for fucking sale, get over it, you're not getting Greenland.
And by the way, Adam, just on that, let's just very quickly show this video from this fabulous European politician and his message to Trump. Have a look at this.
Listen very carefully. Greenland have been part of the Danish kingdom for 800 years. It's an integrated part of our country. It is not for sale. Let me put it in words you might understand. Mr. Trump, f*** off.
There you go, mate. That at the end of the day, sometimes that's how you have to speak.
And this is the thing, like that. That's right. All bets are off now. We're in a different time and a different age, and so legislation and litigation is not going to get us out of where we are. When you control the courts and you control the houses of Parliament, those two avenues are closed to you to make any difference. So the question is, how do we make a difference going forward? And it's going to have to be different to the way that we've done it before, because this is a different character and it's a different time and it's a different threat.
And you know what? I think that's a great way to wrap up the show. But the best way of approaching this going forward is to approach these topics with no fear.
And no favour, mate.
Beautiful, mate. We'll see you next week. Thanks for watching, everyone.